Well, good old Uncle Joe, President Joe Biden, is on vacation today with the Saudi barbarians in the vaunted Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which Uncle Joe recently described as a pariah state led by one crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, the terrible, no good, very bad mastermind behind the dastardly assassination of the very important and skilled journalist Jamal Khashoggi, someone who has contributed more to journalism in our lifetimes than any other living person on this planet. He did so much to expose government corruption and deep state plots to funnel guns to revolutionaries and stage coups. And he even exposed some collateral damage, innocent civilians who were killed during these dastardly missions that were being carried out illegally and without the knowledge or consent of the American people. Oh, wait. This is so embarrassing. I just confused Jamal Khashoggi with Julian Assange, that Australian terrible no good rat who is going to end up on death row, who is going to be extradited to the United States and has been in prison for years. I was confusing Jamal Khashoggi's achievements with Julian Assange's. No. Jamal Khashoggi didn't do any of those things. Jamal Khashoggi is the nephew, I believe, the nephew of Adnan Khashoggi, who was I believe, an arms dealer from Saudi Arabia, who played a key role in the Iran-Contra scandal. And don't quote me on this, but I believe Jamal Khashoggi, the wonderful, innocent Washington Post so-called journalist who was assassinated by Mohammed bin Salman, I believe his uncle Adnan was the guy who was being used as the cutout by Ronald Reagan to run the guns to Iran. Or not to Iran. I forget how. I don't even remember, honestly, how Iran-Contra worked. It was decades before I was born. I've only ever looked at it sort of like adjacently. I never directly studied Iran-Contra, but, I forget how the scheme worked. And that was the point of Iran-Contra. It was supposed to be opaque, and they were running guns and hostages back and forth and money, and it was going this direction. It was going through Israel and Iran, and then back to, where was it? Nicaragua. Is that where the Contras were fighting probably Daniel Ortega? Honestly, the details don't really matter. Because my point is to tell you who this Jamal Khashoggi guy was and why they're upset that Mohammed bin Salman had him assassinated and chopped up into a bunch of tiny little pieces and then smuggled out of the embassy in Turkey. The Washington Post is a deep state publication. The Khashoggi family very much tied into the American deep state, and he was a critic of the current, Saudi government from within the American deep state. That's how you have to look at it. He was essentially a CIA critic of the Saudi regime. So he wasn't just any old critic. He wasn't just any old dissident. He was someone within the U.S. intelligence community who had some criticisms of MBS and his family. And so people like the Washington Post considered him to be an untouchable, and that's why they're so disgusted by his assassination. Has nothing to do with, journalistic accomplishments or the freedom of speech or anything like that. All these people, the folks at the Washington Post, they would love to see Julian Assange lynched in Times Square. But at this point, all that doesn't matter. Because, you see, it's time for the big boys and girls to get down to real work. Because we got a problem in this world. We got a problem in the Western world and in the United States. And that problem is we're not pumping any oil. We're not pumping any of our own oil. And the Europeans have decided not to buy any oil from the Ruskies anymore. They decided to burn their bridges with the Ruskies. So Uncle Joe has to go down to Jeddah to beg MBS, the slayer of Jamal, to pump more oil. And in that effort, even though he got off the plane, he was real chummy, he fist bumped MBS. He acted like he was real buddy-buddy with him. He legitimized, in scare quotes, Mohammed bin Salman, the man who is to become the next king of Saudi Arabia. And despite all that, the Saudis are not going to be pumping more oil. At least not yet. That's what they say. They say they're not going to be pressured into it politically. They're not going to pump more oil for political reasons. They're saying they'll pump more oil when they see that there's a shortage. And so, boy, it's pretty funny seeing how pathetic Uncle Joe can act, how he can get down on his knees and beg men who walk around in dresses, which used to be something that we Americans could make fun of them for. Now we can't anymore because there are men in Biden's administration who walk around in dresses, who wear a dress to work. I won't say who, because that would be hate speech. So I'm not committing hate speech because I'm not talking about anyone in particular. So YouTube can't get mad at me. But nevertheless, the point of this trip is for Joe Biden to go beg the Saudis to pump more oil. And this trip, it's been talked about for a while. It took them a while to actually get the trip put together. It makes me wonder if the Saudis were not keen on visiting with Uncle Joe because they had no interest in lowering oil prices and in increasing oil production. As far as their public statements, that is still the case. These shrewd Arab sheikhs have been unshaken by Uncle Joe's overtures. And apparently, it seems as though that was unexpected on the part of the Biden administration. It seems they were expecting to be able to announce some kind of agreement for the Saudis to pump more oil and to provide relief to the American people and the American economy. But alas, it is not the case thus far. When asked what the point of this trip was, or maybe that wasn't exactly how the question was phrased, because I saw the answer, not the question itself. But Joe Biden said that the point of this trip was not to meet with MBS. And in fact, before, he seemed to have been quite opposed publicly to meeting with this terrible dictator who murdered Jamal Khashoggi, something that the Biden administration was very upset about. Well, that's been out the window, though. So far, though, it seems that all he's accomplished has been meeting with Jamal Khashoggi and supposedly legitimizing him. But Biden says that in the coming weeks, we will see what the real purpose of this trip was. So he seems to be implying that the Saudis will relent, and in time they will increase oil production. But so far, that doesn't seem to be the case. We have no real reason to believe that. I mean, why would the Saudis increase production? And it's not like oil prices are high because the Saudis reduce production. The Saudis are pumping as much as they were before. It's just that the U.S. and the EU have screwed up so much of the rest of the oil market. They've screwed up the U.S. Oil production. They've screwed up the exportation of Russian produced oil. And so the Saudis are still pumping, I believe, as much as they were before, when oil was low. But now they're making a lot more money. So why would they want to bring the price back down? I mean, this would be a very comfortable position for the Saudis. And they should try and take as much profit as they can if the West is really going to go forward with the World Economic Forum and the Green New Deal and try to just get themselves off of oil entirely. The Saudis should be trying to squeeze every last dollar and euro out of us while they can. That is, unless you believe that the West won't be able to do all that, which I don't believe they will. But people like Joe Biden, they say, no, in a few years, we're not going to be using oil anymore. We only need it now, but we want it to be cheap now. Well, why would anyone who produces oil want oil to be cheap now if they know this is one of their last opportunities to make any money on oil? Maybe they want oil prices to be reasonable, if they could produce it, for decades and decades to come or another few centuries. But we're being told that oil as a resource is going to be phased out. And so is coal. I mean, coal is something that goes back, in the economy much further than oil. And these are important resources, very useful resources. So, needless to say, I'm not too hopeful about this trip. I think that it's coming from a very bad place. You don't just go to the Saudis and tell them to start pumping more. You need to put your money where your mouth is, Uncle Joe, and decide that the United States is ready to pump more itself before you go and beg to the oil sheikhs. If the U.S. announced that it was going to allow a lot more drilling here and unleash U.S. domestic oil production and exploration, the Saudis might just ramp up production because they want to maximize the amount of oil that they're able to sell into the market before those U.S. fields come online. They're going to want to get while the getting's good. But as of right now, the Saudis are told, they're pretty much the only game in town. Venezuela's sanctioned. Russia is sanctioned. The U.S. doesn't want to drill. The U.S. doesn't even want to, build a pipeline to Canada. So the Sauds are sitting pretty. They should pump as much as they want and bring in as much income as they want every year. They have no incentive to change. They have no possible motivation for it. Especially when it only serves to help a president who they're not friendly with. A president who hates them and called them a pariah state. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.